She hired a stranger for one night, never knowing he was a billionaire boss. Asterisk. Before we begin, I kindly request that you please subscribe to my channel. Now, please share in the comments where you're watching from. Asterisk. When loneliness becomes unbearable. Vivian Hart pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her apartment window, watching the city pulse with life 30 stories below. Wednesday night, and the streets hummed with people who seemed to know exactly where they belonged. She had stopped pretending she was one of them. The decision had taken 3 weeks to make. 3 weeks of staring at her phone, opening the website, then closing it. 3 weeks of telling herself she was fine, that work was enough, that independence meant not needing anyone. Tonight, the lie finally broke. Her fingers moved across the screen with surprising steadiness. She filled out the form methodically, answering questions designed to match her with someone appropriate. When she reached the final section, the one asking for special requests, she paused. Then she typed 4 words that felt more important than everything else combined. Please be kind. That is all. That changes everything. The confirmation came within an hour. Someone would arrive at 9. No name, just a reference number and a promise of discretion. Vivian cleaned her apartment, not because it was dirty, but because having something to do made the waiting easier. At 8:57, she checked her reflection one last time. No makeup beyond basics, comfortable clothes. She wanted to be herself tonight, whatever that meant anymore. The knock came exactly on time. 3 measured taps, confident but not aggressive. Vivian opened the door and found herself looking at someone who did not match any expectation she had built. He was tall, but not imposing, dressed simply in dark jeans and a navy sweater. No expensive watch, no designer labels, nothing that screamed performance. His face held an unusual quality of attention, as if he was already listening before she spoke. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm and unhurried. "I am James. You requested someone who could simply be present." Vivian stepped aside, allowing him into her space. "I did, thank you for coming." Breaking down the walls, James removed his jacket and folded it carefully over a chair. The gesture was unconscious, automatic, the kind of habit formed over years of existing in structured environments. Vivian noticed but said nothing. Before anything else, she began, gesturing toward the sofa. "I need us to establish boundaries. I have never done this before, and I want to make sure we both feel comfortable." "I appreciate that," James replied, sitting where she indicated but leaving clear space between them. "What boundaries matter most to you?" Vivian sat across from him, maintaining the distance deliberately. "Honesty matters. If at any point this feels wrong to either of us, we stop. No explanations required, no guilt involved. You get paid for your time regardless." James nodded slowly. "I agree completely. And I want to add something, if I may. Go ahead. If you ever feel uncomfortable, even slightly, I will be the one to leave. You will not have to ask." The answer caught her off guard. Most people, she realized, would have offered reassurance or tried to charm their way past her caution. He did neither. He simply treated her boundaries as if they mattered. The conversation that should not have been real. They talked for an hour before either of them noticed the time passing. Vivian found herself explaining things she had not said aloud in months. The way success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. How people assumed strength meant invulnerability. The exhaustion of performing competence every single day. James listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without trying to fix anything. He simply held space for her words as if they deserved to exist without judgment. "Can I ask why you do this work?" Vivian asked eventually, genuinely curious. James considered the question carefully. "Because sometimes people need someone who will show up without wanting anything in return. And sometimes pretending to be someone else makes it easier to be honest." Vivian studied his face, searching for deception. She found none. What she found instead was something that frightened her more than any lie could have. She found someone who seemed to genuinely see her. "I am glad you came tonight," she said quietly. "So am I," James replied. Neither of them knew that honesty would become the very thing that tore them apart. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. Outside, the city continued its restless rhythm. Inside, two people sat together in a silence that felt less like absence and more like permission. And Julian Cross, wearing the name James Reed like armor, felt something he had not expected. He felt seen. When the mask falls away, 3 days passed like a dream. Vivian kept trying to convince herself was real. James had left before dawn that night, exactly as promised, with a quiet goodbye that felt more genuine than any dramatic farewell could have been. She told herself it was over, a single moment of connection that would fade into memory. She was wrong. The invitation to the Meridian Foundation gala had been sitting on her desk for 2 weeks. Corporate networking disguised as charity, the kind of event where everyone smiled too much and meant too little. Vivian almost declined. Almost, but her boss had made it clear that attendance was expected, not optional. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated, and arrived fashionably late to avoid the initial rush of forced conversations. The ballroom was exactly as she expected. Crystal chandeliers, champagne circulating on silver trays, people clustered in groups defined by industry and influence. Vivian accepted a glass of wine and positioned herself near the windows, away from the main crowd. She was calculating how long she needed to stay before leaving when the lights dimmed slightly. The revelation that shatters everything. A voice boomed through the sound system. Polished and practiced. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. We are honored to celebrate the extraordinary contributions of tonight's keynote speaker and primary benefactor. Vivian barely listened. These introductions all sounded the same. His company has revolutionized the technology sector while maintaining an unprecedented commitment to ethical innovation. His leadership has inspired a generation of entrepreneurs. Please welcome Julian Cross, Chief Executive Officer of Crosstech Industries. The name meant nothing to her initially. She glanced up at the stage out of polite obligation. Then she saw him. The wineglass nearly slipped from her hand. Her breath caught, sharp and sudden, as if she had been physically struck. James. Except he was not James at all. He stood on stage in an immaculate suit, commanding the space with the kind of presence that came from years of being obeyed. His hair was styled differently, his posture more formal, but the eyes were unmistakable. Those same eyes that had looked at her with such careful attention in her apartment. The escort she had hired was not an escort. He was a billionaire. The weight of understanding. Vivian's mind raced backward, retracing every moment of that night. His careful movements, the way he listened, the unconscious habits that suggested structure and discipline. Details she had noticed, but not questioned, now assembled into a picture that made her stomach turn. He had been testing her, studying her, watching her be vulnerable while hiding behind a disguise she never agreed to. Around her, people applauded enthusiastically. On stage, Julian acknowledged the praise with practiced humility. Speaking about innovation and responsibility in phrases clearly refined through repetition, his voice was the same, but everything else felt like a performance. Then his eyes scanned the crowd, and found her. The recognition was instant. His expression shifted, just for a fraction of a second. The confident smile faltered. He knew that she knew. Vivian did not wait to see what would happen next. She set her glass down on the nearest table and walked toward the exit, moving quickly but not running. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to be anywhere he was not. Confrontation in the cold air. She made it to the terrace before the tears of anger threatened to break through. The night air was cold against her skin, but she welcomed it. Anything to shock her system back into something that made sense. Vivian. His voice behind her was quiet, almost hesitant. She had not heard him follow. She spun around, and there he was, Julian Cross, still in his expensive suit, looking at her with an expression that might have been regret. "Do not," she said sharply, her voice low but fierce. "Do not say my name like we are friends." "I know you are angry," he began. "Angry?" She laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "I am trying to decide which part makes me feel more sick. The fact that you lied to me, or the fact that I trusted you." Julian took a step closer, then stopped when he saw her flinch. I never meant to hurt you. Then what did you mean to do? Vivian demanded. What was that night? Some kind of social experiment. A game wealthy people play when they get bored. No, he said firmly. It was not like that. Then explain it to me, she said, her voice breaking slightly despite her effort to stay controlled. Explain why a billionaire pretends to be an escort. Explain why you walked into my home. Let me be completely vulnerable. And never once told me the truth. The truth that cannot be undone. Julian exhaled slowly, and for a moment, he looked less like the man on stage, and more like the person who had sat across from her in her apartment. I wanted to know what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a position, to be seen without the filter of what I own or control. So you made me part of your little experiment without asking, Vivian said coldly. You had all the power in that room, and you let me think we were equals. We were equals, Julian insisted. No, Vivian said, shaking her head. We were not. You knew everything. I knew nothing. That is not equality. That is manipulation. The word hung between them like an accusation that could not be taken back. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and seemed to understand for the first time the full weight of what he had done. You are right, he said quietly. I had no right to deceive you. I thought I was searching for authenticity, but what I did was betray your trust. Vivian felt tears threatening again, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. The worst part, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, is that I actually believed you when you said you chose to be there. I thought that night meant something. It did, Julian said urgently. Everything I felt, everything I said, that was real. How can I possibly believe that now? Vivian asked. How can I trust a single moment when the entire foundation was a lie? Julian had no answer. For a man who had built an empire on finding solutions, he stood there silent and powerless. Vivian wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold the night had become. I need you to understand something, she said. When I invited you into my home, I was not inviting a billionaire. I was inviting someone I thought would treat me with respect, and you did, in your way. But you never gave me the choice to decide whether I wanted to be vulnerable with someone like you. I know, Julian said. And I am sorry. Sorry is not enough, Vivian replied. She turned toward the door, then paused. Goodbye, Julian. She walked away, leaving him alone on the terrace, and this time she did not look back. Inside, the gala continued. Outside, Julian Cross stood surrounded by the city he had conquered, and for the first time in his life, wealth offered no protection at all. Don't when silence speaks louder than words. The first week after the gala, Vivian expected something, a phone call, a message, an elaborate gesture designed to smooth over what had happened. Flowers delivered to her office. An apology written on expensive stationery. Something that screamed of a powerful man trying to control the narrative. Nothing came. The silence was so complete that she found herself checking her phone more often than she wanted to admit, not because she wanted to hear from him, but because the absence felt deliberately crafted. She hated that it affected her at all. Work became her refuge again. She threw herself into projects with renewed intensity, staying late at the office, accepting assignments no one else wanted. Anything to avoid the quiet of her apartment, where memories of that night still lingered like ghosts. 2 weeks after the revelation, something unexpected arrived. Not for her, but about him. The changes no one asked for. Vivian was scrolling through industry news. During her lunch break, when she saw the headline, Crosstech Industries announces major policy overhaul on corporate ethics, she almost kept scrolling. Almost. The article detailed a comprehensive internal review initiated by Julian Cross himself. The company was eliminating what it vaguely termed observational research programs and implementing new protocols requiring explicit consent for any form of behavioral study or data collection involving individuals. The language was corporate, carefully neutral. But Vivian understood immediately what it meant. He had shut down whatever program had brought him to her door. She read the statement 3 times. searching for self-congratulation or publicity seeking. Instead, she found something that looked remarkably like accountability taken quietly, without fanfare. Everything okay? Her colleague stopped by her desk, noticing her expression. Yeah, Vivian said, closing her laptop. Just surprised by something. That night, alone in her apartment, she allowed herself to wonder what it cost him to make those changes. Then she reminded herself that wondering was dangerous. An unexpected inheritance 3 weeks after the gala. Vivian received an email from the Community Bridges Foundation, a small non-profit she had volunteered with years ago. The director wanted to schedule a call about a project Vivian had once proposed. During the call, the director explained that an anonymous donor had fully funded Vivian's original proposal for a mental health support network designed by and for working professionals, the program she had written when she still believed her ideas could make a difference, before budget cuts and bureaucratic indifference had taught her otherwise. We have been trying to find funding for this for 2 years, the director said, excitement clear in her voice. This donor came forward, specifically requesting that you lead the implementation if you are willing. Vivian felt something tighten in her chest. Did the donor leave any message? There was a pause. Just one line in the grant letter. It said, this was always her vision. It deserves to exist without conditions. Vivian closed her eyes. She knew that phrasing, that careful acknowledgement of ownership without claiming credit. Who was the donor? She asked, though she already knew. Anonymous, the director confirmed. The legal paperwork ensures they have no control over the program and no ability to influence decisions. It is entirely yours if you want it. Vivian sat in silence for a long moment. Let me think about it, she said finally. I will call you back tomorrow. After hanging up, she stared at her laptop screen, emotions churning in a way she could not quite name. This was not an apology. This was something else entirely. Recognition without expectation. Support without strings. It was the kind of gesture that could not be bought with money alone. It required listening, remembering, caring about what mattered to someone else more than about being forgiven. The unexpected encounter 6 weeks after the gala. Vivian attended a small panel discussion on workplace mental health. She had agreed to speak before the foundation offer came through, and she refused to back out just because things had become complicated. The venue was intimate, maybe 75 people in a converted loft space. She arrived early, reviewed her notes, and told herself she was prepared for anything. She was not prepared to see Julian sitting in the back row. He was not dressed for attention. Simple clothes, no entourage, sitting alone with a notebook in his lap. When their eyes met, he did not smile or wave or make any gesture that demanded acknowledgement. He simply nodded once, a small recognition that asked for nothing in return. Vivian gave her presentation on autopilot, discussing loneliness in professional environments and the importance of spaces where vulnerability was met with support rather than judgment. She spoke about her own experiences without naming specifics. And the audience responded with the kind of attention that made every word feel worthwhile. When the panel ended, she expected him to approach. Instead, he stood, gathered his things, and walked toward the exit. He was going to leave without speaking to her. Julian said his name before she could stop herself. He turned, waiting. Vivian walked over, aware that people were watching, but no longer caring. Why are you here? Because you were speaking, he said simply. And because what you said mattered. You did not have to come, she said. I know, Julian replied. But I wanted to understand better. The work you are doing, the program you are building, it is important. I wanted to learn from it. Vivian studied his face, searching for performance or manipulation. She found neither. What she found was something she had not expected to see again. Genuine humility. The foundation funding, she said. That was you, yes, he confirmed. But the vision was always yours. I just made sure it had the resources it deserved. You cannot buy forgiveness, Vivian said quietly. I know, Julian said. That is not what this is. This is me trying to do better. Not for you, but because you helped me see how much I needed to change. The beginning that feels like truth. They stood there in the slowly emptying room. The distance between them still present, but somehow less insurmountable than before. I am still angry, Vivian said. What you did still hurt. You have every right to be, Julian replied. I do not expect that to change. But, she continued, and the word felt like stepping off a ledge. I appreciate that you did not try to fix it with empty gestures. The changes you made, the way you stepped back, that mattered. Julian nodded, accepting her words without pushing for more. I need time, Vivian said. And I need to know that if we ever speak again, it is because we both choose it. Not because of guilt, not because of some attempt at redemption. Because we both want honesty. I understand, Julian said. And whenever you are ready, if you are ever ready, I will be here. No disguises, no deception. Just the truth. Vivian felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. The kind that comes not from forgetting what happened, but from witnessing genuine change. Goodbye, Julian, she said. Goodbye, Vivian, he replied. This time, when she walked away, it felt different. Not like an ending, but like a door left intentionally ajar. Not locked, not thrown open, just slightly open enough to let light through. Julian watched her leave, then stepped out into the city night. For the first time since the terrace, he felt something other than regret. Not hope exactly, but something close. The possibility that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt through action rather than words. And in her apartment that night, Vivian sat by the window looking out at the city that had witnessed everything. She thought about second chances and what they required. She thought about the difference between apology and accountability. And she thought about a man who had finally learned that being seen honestly was worth more than any disguise could ever offer. The story did not end with declarations or dramatic reunions. It ended with two people choosing, slowly and carefully, to build something real from the ruins of what had been broken. Because true connection does not begin with perfection. It begins when both people choose honesty, even when it costs them everything else.